This is the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching and publishing services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Michael Devellano, author of Automate and Grow. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate being on.
Are you ready to get started?
Always ready.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I think my process was very methodical, so I think people get overwhelmed and they stretch the work out over way too long of a period. So, and actually I did a video on this that I shared with people somewhere. I put it on YouTube. But basically, what I suggest is really just have a game plan and then just stick to it. So for me, for example, I wasn't worried about trying to edit as I go, and I think that's a big mistake people make. They're trying to evaluate what they're writing. For me, it was about bulk. So it was like get the information out of your head and onto the page, and then worry about editing and cleaning it up later. And I actually wrote my book in under 45 days.
Well, Michael, you bring up a great point, because I think one of the biggest struggles that we have as authors is getting everything out there and worrying that it's perfect. Well, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get done. And that's one of the things where, with my philosophy and what I also teach my clients, is just get it done. Worry about the edits after your first draft is done. Have a quick look at it. Send it to your editor. That's their job. Let them worry about cleaning it up. And then let it go from there, because we talk about this all the time on the show. In fact, we talked about this on the last episode and most of the previous week, and it's this: done is better than perfect.
Exactly. I think it's like get it out and then worry about making it, shaping it the way you want later, and get some help with that.
Absolutely. Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, it's different out there today, right? Like, there's a lot of tools that exist today that didn't, 10 years ago even, to get self-published. Amazon and Kindle Direct and all the tools that they provide are super useful if you just want to self-publish. Obviously, the challenge with that is getting it out there, but you don't have to ask anyone for permission to do that. So I think the biggest part of that is understanding what tools are at your disposal and not getting overwhelmed by them. If you go a more traditional route through a publisher, then obviously you're asking for permission of whether you can write and publish your book, and that's way more difficult and more challenging. And I think even those types of publishers are looking to see whether you have your own platform and your own audience already. So to me, it's like, just assume that you're going to have to build that audience yourself and go and learn about the tools that there are to get your book out there, basically.
Well, and how did you get your book out there? Did you go through a publisher, or did you do it yourself?
I did it myself. Amazon, as you know, has a lot of really great tools to not just post the book up, but really get it into print. And they have the print-on-demand services, and so it really lets you, once you get your manuscript edited and formatted, they give you a really, what's pretty, once you learn about it, an easy way to get your book printed and then get it even put on, ebooks and e-readers, and digitally published on their platforms. So now you're in a marketplace.
Excellent. Well,
For me, it was just like learn about the tools and get it done,
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk marketing a little bit. So please share a marketing strategy that you used in your book launch that worked well.
Yeah, so I hit it on a bunch of things. One thing was actually doing my own podcast, and that was a great way to really kind of, get the word out that I was in this space and interviewing other experts and having them promote it. So that allowed me kind of, even around the same name, and you know what the power of a podcast is, it builds audience and then attention. So that was really helpful. I actually also did a 25-city tour. And I did that in partnership with WeWork, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with WeWork, but they're they're probably one of the most well-known co-working spaces, and they have like offices or office facilities in major centers. So I actually did like, wow, I was in Toronto, I was in New York, in multiple sites. I was in LA and San Francisco, and I just kind of did a little tour of that to promote the events live, and then just worked really through LinkedIn to fill those events. And that was like, one of the most effective things I did, which was just do live book signing events.
So you did a 25 city tour, and did WeWork sponsor it, or how did that relationship work?
What they did is, I'm a WeWork member, so they gave me free space in every city, and then they promoted it to the membership base. And each of those locations has anywhere from 400 to 1,500 people. So that helped promote it, and then I just geographically targeted people through my LinkedIn outreach to also fill the events. And actually, Eventbrite was really useful too. Just posting the event up on Eventbrite got a lot of traffic.
So
I had anywhere, like the smaller ones were kind of like 5-10 people, but the larger ones were like 70-80.
So were these events specifically book signings?
Yep, they were all book signings.
And they were
most people didn't know me from Adam.
And they were at the WeWork locations, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So
Wow.
what I did was, it was pretty good. So I basically did a lot of happy hour, some lunch and learn, but I would sponsor the happy hour essentially. So I would come in, did a little presentation, answered questions. Some locations, depending on the size of the audience, actually would ask someone to be an MC, and then I would sign books. People would buy books on the spot, and then all of them were, of course, when they registered on Eventbrite or on WeWork, their internal community, they were added to my mailing list.
Now, was there an actual fee for them to come in, or was it free for them to attend, and then they had the option to buy the book at that point?
I did it both ways. I would have let WeWork members were free. Sometimes I tested out like charging $10 or $20 and then including a book, like a signed book, and people would actually pre-purchase. But I found it was more important to fill the room. So the events where I actually didn't charge, I actually sold the most books on site. So they would, I would bring printed books. I pre-ordered X number from Amazon, and people bought them up, and I signed them.
So that's a really nice way for a profit margin too. So if you're buying them in bulk for, let's say, $3 a copy or $4 a copy, and you're selling them for $10 or $15, how much were you selling the books for?
I think I was just doing it for $10 on site. It
Wow.
was like, I think to your point, it was like, it's a 260-page book or something like that in print. It's a 6x9, and I think it, when you factor in shipping and stuff, it probably works out to like $350 a book or something.
Now, did you actually bring the books with you, or did you have them shipped to the location?
It depended. I generally brought them with me. I just had them shipped to my location and brought them. But it was, I don't know. It was a good way to, to sell books on site. And then, people would buy it online as well before they showed up too. So sometimes they brought their book, and then sometimes they just had a digital book.
Well, that's ingenious, and I appreciate you letting me ask you the follow-up questions. I know I hit you a few times on those, but that's just such a cool concept that I'm like, okay, how can we make this work for other authors? So a 25-city tour with WeWork, you potentially have an MC at the events. You would use Eventbrite, and you would either charge them for admission or just have them come in for free. And then for those come in for free, it would be like a $10 charge to get an autographed paperback copy of the book.
Exactly.
How many people did you have per event, or just on average?
I think the biggest ones were kind of like 70, 80 people, and the smaller ones were kind of like, like 10, like 8 to 12, somewhere around there. It depended. But, I think I met over 1,000 people when I calculated it.
Wow, so this tour was very profitable.
Yeah, I mean, you got to travel around a little bit.
Yeah.
Nobody's, sponsoring it. Really, to me, it was about building the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the word out, and even if it was break even, it didn't bother me. It was, because in the end, I'm not worried about making money on books. Like, to me, it was just eventually I was looking to professionally promote myself under a brand, or just get the word out of what I do, and I think it was successful in that respect. I mean, it definitely expanded my network, and I I took my business in another direction, so it was positive.
Well, and I think what you did was absolutely ingenious because you utilizing it on the front end to help cover the costs, and then really using it to leverage your back end with your offers and your company. I mean, this is an absolutely brilliant strategy, and I really appreciate you being so open to sharing the entire process with that.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, in the end, it's like, it's not rocket science, but it's a lot of work, and sometimes people stop because they don't have faith in it. But to me, it was like, just made sense. I was meeting so many people, I just keep doing it.
Absolutely. Well, let's transition to the hardest question, as we were talking about before the show started, and that is, what is your favorite book? And what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Man, it's such a tough question, but I think the book that kept popping into my mind is Brian Tracy's Maximum Achievement. And I think that's one of the few books that I've read many times. I mean, there's nonfiction books that, I obviously love. I love Haruki Murakami and Chuck Palahniuk, and there's obviously authors that I'm into, but I don't know, that book I've read a number of times, and he provided what I felt was like a really clear, methodology, if you will, to really accomplish anything you want. And a lot of it was mindset, and a lot of it was tactics. And I don't know, I just think it's a classic book that maybe people don't know exists. No. Actually, funny story, I was in San Diego. I was walking down, I had a book signing, and I was randomly parking on the street, and I realized that I was across from Brian Tracy International, and I actually crashed his office and brought a book to him.
Was he there?
He was sick, unfortunately. He was supposed to shoot that day, but I got to meet his agency and everyone there, and I got to sign him a book over, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, it was unfortunate, but yeah, it was kind of funny. They're like, wow, you randomly walked in off the street. I'm like, yeah.
Well, and he is such a nice guy, and he always goes out of his ways to support authors, especially those that are in publishing or looking to help other people. He is so great about that.
Yeah, it seems like he's very willing. I think I saw an interview with him where, and I probably should have asked this, but he will provide a quote for pretty much any author that asks him. I guess number one, he understands. That guy's written a ton of books, right? I don't even know how many books he's written, but hundreds, I think. And then he understands the difficulty in that process, but at the same time, he also sees it as a way to promote his own stuff.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your favorite quote. So for our final question, Michael, what is your favorite quote and why?
So, I was kind of struggling with this. But I think the thing that always stuck in my mind was a quote from Einstein. And I grew up really very interested in admiring Einstein, just the way he thought and the way he, approached problems in the world. And he had but you would think that a scientific person would think in a very regimented way, but his quote was that imagination is more important than knowledge, and knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. And that's the quote that always I kind of remember, and the way that he thought was more creative than methodical, even though he was using the scientific method, but the way that he had breakthroughs was really in a creative fashion. It was kind of interesting. So that's kind of the one quote that always stuck with me.
Excellent. Well, Michael, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
You can find me at automategrow.biz, and you can, if you go /podcast, you'll see episodes of the podcast. And actually, I'd love to have you as a guest on my podcast if you have time at some point.
Absolutely.
Just let me know what would be a good time. It'd be great. And then you can reach me on most platforms at automategrow.biz as well, including Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can also, if you ever really want to, you can text me at 818-588-6771. That's my Google Voice number, but I'll get it.
Excellent. Well, Michael, I want to thank you once again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.